Good morning, Change Your Worlders, and everyone else who's come here today for day 3 of the complicated nature of narcissistic abuse. Welcome, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk about the various relationships that you can have with a narcissist, because narcissists show up in pretty much every kind of relationship we could have, whether it be mother, father, sister, brother, friend. We talked about workplace yesterday, and so it shows up in families, in the family system. It can show up pretty much anywhere. So I want to start by talking about the family system when there is a narcissistic parent. You know, we think of a family as a unit of people who, it's a cohesive unit. Everyone has each other's backs. There's a loyalty. You can rely on each other. There's love, there's trust. In a narcissistic family, none of that is true. When you have a narcissistic family, you think you have a family because the word family is this emotionally charged word. We know it comes with all these expectations. We know what a family is. However, a narcissistic family is not a family at all. None of the things that would apply to a true family, loving, supportive, loyal family, apply at all to the narcissistic family. Because there is a narcissist at the head of the family, and everyone is beneath them. So the rest of the people are really all in their own corners trying to survive. And when I mean trying to survive, we're talking about children. Children do not have the mindset, the preparation, the coping mechanisms, the strategies to be able to deal with abuse. They're not built in. These are things we develop over time. So when a child is in a family unit like this, and it's so abusive and destructive and painful, and every child is being treated differently, it's very, very hard for a child to cope with this. So they use what's called maladaptive coping strategies. And maladaptive coping strategies are there to just get them through their childhood. Some of the things they may do is, one of the things that they do is turn into a narcissist in order to deal with it. Other children often become codependent. And their job in this family is to make sure the narcissist is happy and to please everyone and to be the peacemaker for everyone, because that's how they control their environment as best as they can. Some children dissociate. They go off into another world at the time of the abuse. And it doesn't even have to be, the emotional abuse doesn't even have to be directed at that child. If it's directed to other family members, the impact on that child is the same. There have been many, many studies, imaging studies, that show that children who grow up in these environments absolutely have changes to their brain. There's shrinkage to the hippocampus, because there's constant flood of cortisol. And our bodies are not made to handle this constant flood of cortisol. And so what it does is it damages part of the brain. But, you know, it's really important, if you're the child who's grown up in an environment like that, to understand that there could be, that your brain could have been altered as a result of this. And the area of the brain that is altered is the area of emotional regulation. So as adults, we may find that our moods are very precarious. We may find that we can slip into depression or anxiety, sadness, very, very easily. And we don't even often know why. And when we do these things, we feel like we're responsible, like something is wrong with us. But I want to let you know that there is a chemical change in your brain if you've grown up in these environments. And often, a medication like an SSRI could be very, very helpful. So let's talk about the narcissistic mother. And I talked about this yesterday. Narcissistic mothers, and let me just back up and say that any relationship you have with a narcissist is not the role that they are pretending to play. So in other words, if you have a narcissistic mother, you don't have a mother, you have a narcissist. If you have a narcissistic father, you don't have a father, you have a narcissist, and so forth and so on. That's really, really hard to wrap your head around. But with the words mother and father come these expectations that you are supposed to be loved. There are maternal and paternal instincts, especially when they have a child. They're supposed to love you, and they're supposed to have the instincts of nurturing you. That is not true. And the reason that you're experiencing, if you've grown up in a family like this, what hangs you up is, well, I know my mother loves me. She's my mother. I know my father loves me. He's my father. I know he's trying to protect me. He's my father. That's what the job of the father is. The job of the mother is the nurturer, the lover, the person who loves you and supports you. And so even though none of this is being shown to you, you still have the illusion that it is. And people say to me often, if anyone has grown up in this situation, help and support is available from Randi. Yeah, absolutely, I can help you. So for anyone who has grown up in these situations, when you get to be an adult, you just have a really hard time with these mother-father things. And people say to me, Randi, it says, the 10 Commandments say, honor thy father and thy mother. Yeah, it does. And so for a lot of people, this is very, very guilt-producing. But as I explained to you, these people are not fathers and they are not mothers. They are narcissists who take on roles that get them the narcissistic supply that they need. And so for a narcissistic mother who has children to grow her own supply, because babies are natural supply, they just love their mothers unconditionally, and so do toddlers, and so she gets her supply. Doesn't matter how she treats the kid, she's still going to be loved, and they're still going to believe that they are loved. Doesn't matter if they're black and blue. And so this honor thy father and thy mother gets people really hung up. How can I possibly heal from this, Randi? I can't abandon my mother. I can't abandon my father. And even some religions and some cultures ban. That's the worst thing you can do. It's a sin to abandon your mother or your father. One of the tricks that I use with people when they cannot get this idea of mother or father out of their head in order to move forward, because you can't, in order to heal from narcissistic abuse, you have got to recognize and understand exactly what was done to you. And when I say what was done to you, what I really mean is what your experience was. I'm not talking about trashing your mother or trashing your father, throwing them under the bus and blaming them. That's not what this is about. This is about your story, your experience. And in order for you to heal, you have got to understand your experience. You've got to know exactly what was done, what you lacked, what hurt you, and the strategies that you use to cope with it. Because those strategies that you use in childhood are the only ones you'll ever know until you learn more. So what do? We take them into adulthood. We use childhood coping strategies in adulthood, and it doesn't work. Because these are maladaptive. They're not healthy coping mechanisms. They're not learned coping mechanisms. They're adapted for survival. And it's why when we get to be adults, children of narcissistic abuse, where other kids our age or they're becoming adults, they really are kind of soaring in their life. They're growing. They're moving upwards in their life. And children of narcissistic abuse, this is the point in which they plummet. It all falls apart because their life is built on a house of cards. There's no foundation under them. So they keep trying to live life the way anybody else would try to live life, but it doesn't work because life is very challenging. And we have to know how to deal with it. We have to have a boundary system. We have to have self-love, and I'm going to get back to the self-love component in a minute. We have to have self-esteem. We have to value the person that we are. We have to know the person that we are. And all these things are what set us up for a healthy adulthood. So if you're an adult child of narcissistic abuse and your adulthood is traumatic or frustrating, it's because of your childhood. And it's very difficult to see what actually went on in your childhood because for you, your family unit is the only family unit you know. The way your mother acted, the way your father acted. This is the only source of parental guidance or roles that you know. So it's normal for you. It's very difficult to see what actually went wrong. But as I said, unless you do a deep dive and look at it and say, okay, this is why I lack what I lack, because I didn't get it. You know, in a healthy family, parents give children the tools for living. They teach them how to cope. They teach them boundaries. They teach them that they are important, that they are valuable. They teach them to love themselves and to honor themselves and to respect themselves. And they allow them to go through the stages of individuation, meaning that all the stages that children go through from birth to adulthood that help them separate from the parent. But narcissistic parents stunt that growth. They do not allow those children to go through a healthy individuation. They don't allow it. You're humiliated, you're embarrassed, you're guilted for doing it. No, you are the parent's property. It's really what it is. You're their property. And they feel like they can do whatever they want with you. I want to back up to the self-love component because this is something that gets very skewed in adult children of narcissistic abuse. Because they have not been encouraged to love themselves. And whenever they did, they were criticized or humiliated for doing so. And because they grew up with parents or a parent who didn't allow them to be who they are and was very selfish. There's nothing more self-centered than a narcissist. But so because of this, the word self-love is not something that we understand. And when I talk about these things, I'm talking about it from both a personal perspective and a professional perspective, because I have been in both. So I've been where all of you are in pretty much every one of these relationships. So let me tell you what self-love is. And self-love is the center of everything you are and everything you do. If you don't have it, your life is not going to function well. So I'm not talking about just going out and doing nice things for yourself. I'm not talking about pampering yourself, although that is part of self-love. But what I'm really talking about is knowing who you are, honoring who you are, and protecting who you are. Setting boundaries for what you like and what you don't like, what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And understand that we each have our own definition of what feels right and what doesn't feel right. So your definition is not going to be the same as anyone else's. And so if you're looking to other people to define yourself, that's not going to work for you. So self-love is not selfish, because selfishness means that you are taking something from someone else for yourself in a selfish way. That's what narcissists do. That's exactly what they do. And it's very ugly. We don't want to look at it. But that's not what self-love is. Self-love is where you fill your well of love constantly. And then it spills over, and you have love to give anyone you want to give, but you're giving it from a resource that continues to fill. When you don't have self-love, and you are an adult child of a narcissist, and you are a giving person, because most of us are, and if you're on here, you probably, if you've had this experience, then you're probably an overgiver, an oversharer, an overpleaser. But when you do this without self-love, you are giving from a dry well. There's no resource for it. And it's why you get exhausted and burnt out. Because you want to be a giver, but you have no resource to give. So self-love is really, really, really important. And it's one of the things that I work with all my clients on, to help them to understand what it is and to develop it. So that's really the family unit, and I said before, there's kind of a trick that I use with people if they're having a hard time breaking the tie with the narcissistic. It's usually with the narcissistic mother. That's usually where where they have this tie into you and you can't seem to feel separate from it. But what you do is you assign a different name to your mother. And it can have a negative connotation, it can be funny, it can be whatever you want it to be, but it needs to represent the truth of who that person is. And instead of saying my mother or mom, you say Cruella de Vil. You say the witch. You say, I've had people call them the Black Widow spider, which is really apropos because the Black Widow spider sits in wait in her web for something to for a victim to get stuck in the web, and then she feeds on it. Narcissistic? I think so. So that's one trick that I help people use to break that my mother, it's my mother, but it's my mother. You know what I'm saying? How can I abandon my mother? How can I live my life without my mother? Because your mother is not a mother. Your mother is a narcissist. And let's talk about the narcissistic father. The narcissistic father is brutal. They're really cruel. And, you know, I didn't talk about the roles that children are assigned in these families, but you've heard about the golden child, the scapegoat child, the invisible child. And these truly are assigned to children in these families by the narcissistic parent. And then this is the scapegoat child is the child that is supposed to be the dumpster to absorb all the angst of that parent. Everything is supposed to be, they're supposed to be accepting that everything is dumped on them. Feels horrible. But you know what's really interesting about the scapegoat child is the scapegoat child fares the very best out of all the children in the family, long term. But the scapegoat child, it doesn't matter if they're good, it doesn't matter if they're bad. So they might as well lash out, they might as well say what they want to say within these family structures. And it's so much healthier for them. So they usually get away from these families pretty quickly, as soon as they can, and they create a life for themselves. The golden child, which everybody thinks really has it the best, that's not true. The golden child has it really the worst. And the reason is because the golden child has to keep the parent happy. They cannot be themselves. They cannot express themselves. Their job is to keep that parent happy. And if they deviate from that role, then they become subject to what they're watching everybody else in their family experience. So they basically never get to express themselves. And as adults, most of them are codependent. Most of them live their life in the same way that they did as a child. They live their life trying to please everyone, being the helper, being the fixer. I was the golden child, and it's really misunderstood. People think that the golden child is the one who has the best experience. And I had two sisters, and to this day, they still think I had the best experience. They were brutally abused. I mean, emotionally brutally abused, which I had to watch, but I had a terrible, terrible experience. I didn't realize it during that time, you know. I thought my mother loved me. I thought I had it all. But, so like for instance, my mother told me, now the golden child is idolized. The golden child is put up on a pedestal. And nothing can be wrong with the golden child in the narcissistic parent's eyes. Because the golden child is the perfect reflection of who they are, the narcissist. And if that child does something wrong, or there's something wrong with that child, then it's a direct reflection on the parent. Can a narcissist marry a narcissist? Yes, they do. They actually do. But it probably will not last. The only way that a narcissistic marriage can last, two narcissists, I talk about all these relationships in extensively in my book, Close Encounters of the Worst Kind. I really flesh it out, and I give you case histories so that you can see yourself in these roles. The only way that two narcissists can continue in this marriage, and I don't call it a relationship because they're both there getting what they want. They're not there for each other, but they both have the same agenda. So in other words, if they're both highly attracted to wealth, or they both like to be in the limelight, they have to have something that's very much in common that will allow them to then be a couple as narcissists. But they look at each other as being perfect people. And this cannot last because people have injuries. People have illnesses. People become infirm. People lose their looks as we get older. And so that is when this is all going to fall apart. When they're not two peas in a pod, but one of them or the other is not what they used to be. So it can't last, but it can start. And any child who grows up in this kind of environment, it's awful to have two parents like this. So now I want to talk about the enabling parent or the enabling spouse, because this is a heavy, heavy role. We think that if we have a narcissistic mother or we have a narcissistic father, that the other parent is the good parent, that they love us and they're there to protect us. So, okay, we have a narcissistic parent, but at least we have one good parent. The enabling spouse is there for their own needs. Their needs are primary. And whatever keeps them in this relationship is a very self-centered need. Maybe more survival rather than self-centered. It's a survival need. Their life depends on their relationship with the narcissist. And over time, they become merged as one. But the enabling parent will say things to the children like, I know you know your father can be that way, but he loves you, or, your mother has mood swings, but she loves you. They say these things to you. But what you'll realize is when push comes to shove and you need someone to advocate for you, to stand up for you, to be there when you're broken, that parent can't, because they are so aligned with the narcissist that they don't have a separate self. And this is very difficult to wrap your head around, because they are not narcissistic, but they lose their soul and they lose their self. And their affinity is to their partner. That is their survival. To be able to protect you means that they do something against their partner, spouse. And then they have hell to pay for doing that. You're right, Robin. This is not love. This is not love, but it's an illusion that we have when we grow up in these families, that we are loved. And parents, some narcissistic parents will never say that they love you. Some will say it all the time. But there is no love, because love for a child must be unconditional. If it's not unconditional, if there's conditions attached to it, it's not love at all. And it doesn't fulfill the child's needs. So they might as well not say it if it's not going to be conditional. With narcissistic parents, everything they give you can just as easily be taken back. And you know that. You know that. So it keeps you in line for the most part. If they do a nice thing for you, it's not because they want to do a nice thing for you. It's because they want you to owe them. And then this is the thing they will hold over your head. Well, look what I did for you. How can you treat me like this? Look what I did for you. And I had the same situation. My parents bailed me out of a horrendous situation, my first marriage. They bailed me out of that. I had an infant, and I was married to a drug addict who was really getting very, very bad, and his behavior was getting to be very risky and dangerous for us to be there, and we had to go. So we had to go back to my abusers, my parents, because I had no money, I had no place, so it's the only place that I could go. So while we were there, my parents bailed us out. They gave us a place to live. They paid for my attorney. They sent me to a school program so I could get some kind of skill because I didn't have any. And I felt like I owed them for so many years. Look what they did for me. They saved me. But I came to realize that that is something that loving parents just do. They don't want you to owe them. I have 2 adult children. I never want my children to owe me. So that's the difference. So that's the children. Siblings in these relationships. I'm going to go over a little bit today. Siblings in this relationship, sometimes they bond together at different points in their lives. But there is always something between them that causes envy, resentment. And while they may stuff it, while they may not want to express it or want to look at that, they still feel that way, and it will come out. And so, as adults, we don't have a family. We don't have siblings because everybody is in survival mode. And a sibling, the love of a sister, the love of a brother, these are people we're supposed to rely on. And if they're in survival mode just as we are, we can't rely on them. They are just as precarious in their behavior and in their emotions as we are. And they can turn against you very quickly. And what I know from the hundreds of clients I've worked with is that generally only one child in a narcissistic family will get out. They will see it, they will rise above it, and they will move out of it and away from it. They'll do what it takes to move away from it. When they do that, the other siblings, because they're starving for crumbs of affection, when one sibling gives up their crumbs of affection, the others go in deeper for it. They try to steal it. They want more. And they get in closer to the narcissistic parent. And so it's very tough to rise up out of this because you are condemned for doing it. I was. I was called selfish. I was called a narcissist. I was told that I can erase people from my life with no problem. If I don't like something, I just erase them from my life. I've been called everything because I healed. And they didn't. Some people tried to advise me to apologize to my father and make my peace. If I did that, he would just think I was weak and really pile on feelings of shame and guilt. You're right. I talked yesterday or the day before, I talked about going to traditional psychotherapists. And this is what happened. when you go to traditional psychotherapists. They tell you to repair your relationship. Not only psychotherapists, but your friends, because they don't understand it. And they tell you, oh, come on. He's just getting old. Listen, my parents aren't the same as they used to be. All right, so just let it go and they don't get it. And you don't have to apologize to that parent or repair that relationship. That's backwards. You're a victim. You didn't deserve it. You didn't want it. You somehow survived through it, but you certainly don't want to apologize to your abuser. That's insult to injury. And it's why when you are going through these kind of things, don't talk to anyone. Don't talk to your friends about it. Get yourself the support of a professional who understands this intensely, like I do. It's the only place you're going to get your validation. Everyone else is going to make you feel bad. So let me just talk briefly about how a narcissist, what it looks like when you are meeting them in the dating world. So narcissists look for people that they can abuse, which means, and I talked about that yesterday, I think, about being really nice and putting that forward, being really understanding, really giving, really forgiving, giving them the benefit of the doubt when you really shouldn't. They look for people like that. And when they first, like your first date or your first meeting or whatever, they ask you questions. They act as if they're your very best friend. You feel like you've met your soulmate. When they begin to ask you questions, I call it the interview stage. When they ask you questions, you are just pouring it out. Everything that's ever happened to you, everything you want to be, everything you want to have, your disappointments in life, everything. You just spill your guts. The interview is meant to customize their abuse to you. Whatever information you give up at that time is going to be used against you. So every narcissist is going to abuse differently based on what they get from the interview of that person. But they are the perfect partner. They check every box of anything you can ever want. You cannot believe you found this person and you are on a high. But it's an act. It's an act because they are trying to con you into a relationship. And they're not going to con you into a relationship being their true self, or, well, not their true self, but the way they normally behave, narcissistic behavior. They wouldn't capture anyone. So they act as if they are something they are not, and they match you on everything. You say, you like this music. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. I like that too. You have this hobby. I love to do that. Oh my gosh. So they become your perfect match. And you are just letting it go. And then what they do to really seal the deal is they get you into bed as quickly as they can. The reason that they do that is because when you have sex, the hormones of oxytocin and, what's the other one? Whatever, the feel-good hormones. Oxytocin is a bonding hormone. It makes you feel bonded to the person. And the other one is a feel-good hormone that gets you addicted to them. It's the same hormone that someone would feel when they take a drug, which makes them want to keep coming back. So narcissists know that by getting you into bed, you're going to bond to them, and get addicted to them. And this can happen very, very fast. So there are definitely dating protocols that I share with people of what to look for, what red flags to look for, to not get caught up in these things, because these feel really good. The narcissist tells you how much he or she loves you. Oh my gosh, you're my soulmate. Oh my gosh, I've never felt this in my life before. And you're like, wow, I'm loved. You buy it. Why wouldn't you? This is how they capture their long-term hostages. And once you completely give it up and you say, all right, I'll marry you, or you get engaged, or you move in together, or you say, I love you back, there's always a pivotal point when they go, gotcha. And then the facade drops and the true narcissist shows. And all of a sudden, where you can do no wrong, now you can do no right. Nothing you do pleases them. So what do? And this is why we stay in these relationships. What do? Well, you have a logical mind and you say to yourself, I saw the perfect person. I know he or she is in there. And I know I was loved. It's gone, but what did I do to create that? Did I say the wrong thing? Did I do the wrong thing? Was I too pushy? Did I ask too many questions? Did I have demands? And the demands usually are not even really demands. They're just basic things that you need. And you can go through talking yourself or trying to blame yourself for why this happened. You can go through years and decades just thinking, if I do this, he or she will come back to me. Because you don't realize that he or she was never that person. So this is very, very hard to wrap your head around. And so people stay in these relationships, they're like, well, that person's coming back to me. I just got to get it right. So this is what happens in the dating relationship, and this is what holds victims in these hostage situations. They can't see that something is wrong. They know they're being treated wrong, but they blame themselves. So this is a pretty horrible thing. Whether your relationship started with a narcissist in childhood, whether it's with your siblings in childhood or adulthood, siblings can be very brutal. They can be bullies. They can bully each other. They can torment each other. Or whether it's been in your dating and love relationships. And yesterday I talked about the workplace, how it can show up there. It can show up everywhere. And until you heal what you have not developed, or not heal, but until you develop, that's a better way to say it, till you develop what you were lacking, what your parents did not give you, you're going to struggle in life. You have to develop those skills for living. Often, adult children of narcissists don't feel like they're adults. 40, 50, 60, 70, they still feel like the parent's child. So what I want to tell you as I end this session is your healing can absolutely happen. You can be completely healed from this, but you can't do it yourself. So if you're hurting and you want to get rid of this, you need to reach out. And it's not, the work that I do is not the same as a psychotherapist. I don't do psychotherapy. what I do is help you change the way that you think so that you can recognize things. And then I help you develop the skills for living that I know will sustain you forever. And I teach you what boundaries are. I teach you how to begin setting them. And I'm there when things fall apart, because when you first begin to set boundaries, it's going to feel very strange. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to feel like you're being really harsh. And when you first set boundaries, you are harsh. You have to be. You're swinging from one direction all the way to the other. And eventually you come back to center. So these are some of the relationships that happen with narcissists. And I hope that I gave you kind of a good overview. And I don't want anybody that's listening to feel like they have to suffer. You don't have to suffer. You really don't have to suffer. Maybe you have tried therapy and it didn't work. You know, maybe you've tried this, you've tried that, and it didn't work. But you haven't tried working with me, because I work very quickly. People heal very quickly. And I graduate them and let them move on into life. So it's very possible if you're with a knowledgeable person. So I'm going to leave you with that today, because I do have a client I have to go to. But thank you for joining me today. For those who have listened live, commented, or asked questions, I really thank you for that. It does help me to help you, or to share things that I may not think of, because there's so much. Yeah, you're welcome, Robin. Douglas, you're welcome, Douglas. Thank you. You're welcome. So, yeah, I just want you to feel better. That's it. I don't want you walking around with this pain. I know what the pain feels like. I don't want you to feel like that. And I know that you don't have to, okay? So I'm going to leave you with that. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about coping strategies for dealing with a narcissist in your life, when you can and cannot walk away. All right, guys. I'm going to say goodbye. Have a great, great day, and take care. See you tomorrow.